The turquoise water of the Bahamas lapped gently against the shore, a stark contrast to the icy knot forming in my stomach. There it was, plastered across my phone screen, a beaming family photo from the Magic Kingdom. Sophia, my daughter, stood proudly beside her fiancé, Julian, both wearing matching Mickey Mouse ears. My husband, Marcus, and son, Tyler, flanked them, grins stretching from ear to ear. A pang of hurt shot through me. They didn't even tell me they were going to Disney World. I whispered, the words catching in my throat. I reread Sophia's text message accompanying the photo. Having the best spring break ever. Wish you were here, Mom. Wish you were here. The saccharine sentiment felt like a slap in the face. I'd been looking forward to spring break for months. We'd always taken family vacations together. It was our tradition. I'd even started a Pinterest board filled with ideas for a road trip along the California coast. Marcus, I'd said just last week, have you thought about where we should go for spring break? He'd mumbled something about being swamped with work and told me to handle it. I assumed that meant he trusted me to plan, as usual. Clearly, I'd assumed wrong. I scrolled through more photos on Sophia's Instagram. There they were, posing with Cinderella's castle in the background, enjoying a Dole Whip, laughing on a roller coaster. It was a curated highlight reel of family fun, a fun that pointedly excluded me. My hand trembled as I set my phone down on the lounge chair. The tropical paradise surrounding me suddenly felt bleak and empty. Another margarita. Ma'am, the waiter's voice startled me. I hadn't even realized he was there. I'd come to the Bahamas alone, seeking a quiet escape before the spring semester started. I taught history at the local community college, a job I loved but which could be demanding. This trip was supposed to be my recharge, my moment of peace. Now, it felt like exile. Yes, please, I managed, forcing a weak smile. He returned moments later with a frosty glass, the salt clinging to the rim. I took a long sip, the tequila a fleeting balm against the raw hurt. This trip was supposed to be about relaxation, but my mind raced. How could they do this to me? Had I become so invisible, so unimportant? Enjoying your vacation? The waiter asked, his tone polite. It's fine, I replied, my voice flat. I couldn't bring myself to lie. He gave a sympathetic nod and moved on to the next guest. I closed my eyes, the sun warm on my face. I could almost hear the laughter of my family echoing in my ears, a phantom sound from a reality I was no longer a part of. I thought back to all the times I'd put their needs before my own, the countless school events, the carefully packed lunches, the late-night study sessions, the endless emotional support. Had it all been for nothing? Did they not see how much I cared, how much I did for them? The margarita did little to numb the growing ache in my chest. I felt foolish, naive. I'd poured my heart and soul into my family, and they'd repaid me with a casual dismissal. A spring break trip to Disney World without so much as a by your leave. The injustice of it burned. I opened my eyes, my gaze fixed on the horizon. The ocean stretched out before me, vast and endless. It was a reminder of the world beyond my family, a world I had neglected for far too long. A new resolve began to solidify within me, a quiet determination that had nothing to do with Mickey Mouse ears or family photos. Check. Please, I called to the waiter, my voice stronger than before. He hurried over, a questioning look on his face. I paid the bill, adding a generous tip. I had a plane to catch, a life to reclaim. This vacation wasn't over, not by a long shot. It was just beginning. I had a feeling this little trip to the Bahamas was going to turn into something much, much more. The coffee machine gurgled, a pathetic imitation of the cheerful sounds I usually try to make in the mornings. I measured out the grounds, the same way I'd done it for 20 years, enough for 4 mugs. Marcus liked his strong, 2 sugars. Sophia preferred hers with a dash of almond milk, while Tyler, my artistic son, insisted on black coffee, claiming it sharpened his vision. Mom, can you make sure my camera bag is packed? Tyler called from upstairs. I need the wide-angle lens for the trip. The trip, right? Their trip. The Disney World extravaganza planned for spring break. A trip that apparently didn't need a mother. Of course, sweetheart. I replied, my voice flat. The ceramic mugs felt heavy in my hands. I filled 3, leaving the 4th, my own, empty. There was no point. The silence in the kitchen, usually filled with the clatter of breakfast preparations and hurried goodbyes, felt thick and suffocating. The past few days had unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. First, the hushed whispers, the furtive glances between Marcus and the children. Then, the casual mention of a family getaway. Finally, the devastating realization that family in this instance didn't include me. It's just, well, Mom, it's kind of a couples thing, Sophia had stammered, avoiding my gaze. Julian, her fiancé, had chimed in with something about romantic getaways and bonding experiences. I had simply nodded, a tight smile plastered on my face. The word spring break is my busiest time at the community center, forming a flimsy shield. The truth was, I could have rearranged my schedule. I always rearranged my schedule for them. The rhythmic thump of the washing machine filled the void. I loaded the dishwasher, mechanically sorting forks and knives, the familiar routine a strange comfort in this unfamiliar territory. Each task felt weighted, symbolic of the invisible role I played in this family. The laundry, the meals, the endless errands, all done without a second thought. Without acknowledgement. I was the glue that held everything together, the silent engine that kept this household running. And yet, I was deemed unnecessary, superfluous to their family vacation. Mom, my charger. Tyler yelled from the hallway. I retrieved it from the tangled mess of cords on his bedside table. The faint scent of his cologne, a bittersweet reminder of his childhood. He mumbled a hurried thank you, already halfway down the stairs, his mind clearly already in Orlando. I watched them leave, the 3 of them piled into Marcus's SUV, their laughter echoing in the driveway. The slam of the car door felt like a final punctuation mark on my sentence of exclusion. The silence returned, heavier this time, pressing down on me like a physical weight. I sat at the kitchen table, the 3 untouched mugs of coffee growing cold. The sunlight streaming through the window seemed to mock the emptiness inside me. I picked up my phone, scrolling aimlessly through social media, the curated perfection of other families, a stark contrast to the fractured reality of my own. A wave of exhaustion washed over me. I wasn't just tired. I was bone-weary, depleted. A flicker of something else sparked within me, something other than sadness. It was a quiet resolve, a nascent sense of defiance. Perhaps I poured myself a glass of water, the cool liquid a small act of self-care in a day that had so far been devoid of it. I opened the kitchen drawer, my fingers brushing against the smooth surface of my old sketchbook. I hadn't touched it in years, buried under the avalanche of family obligations. A memory surfaced, the quiet joy of creating, the satisfaction of transforming blank pages into worlds of my own making. I pulled the sketchbook out, its worn cover a testament to a forgotten passion. Flipping through the pages, I saw sketches of landscapes, portraits, abstract designs, remnants of a self I had long since abandoned. A small smile played on my lips. Maybe this enforced solitude wasn't a punishment after all. Maybe, just maybe, it was an opportunity to rediscover myself, to unearth the parts of me that had been buried under the weight of motherhood and wifely duties. The house felt different, quieter, but not in a suffocating way. It was a peaceful quiet, a blank canvas waiting to be filled. I walked over to the window, looking out at the blossoming trees in the garden. Spring break. They were off to create memories, to strengthen their bonds. And I would do the same. I would reclaim my time, my space, myself. I picked up my phone and made a call. Hello, the art studio. I'd like to inquire about classes. The woman on the other end began to explain the various options, her voice a cheerful counterpoint to the quiet hum of anticipation building within me. This spring break would be different. It would be a journey, not to a crowded theme park, but to a place far more exciting, far more rewarding. The rediscovery of myself. And who knew, maybe, just maybe, they would come back from their magical kingdom to find a different kind of magic waiting for them at home, a magic they hadn't even realized was missing. Rain lashed against the kitchen window, blurring the Sunday evening streetlights into hazy halos. "Sophia, darling," I said, trying to sound casual, "wouldn't it be lovely to take a family trip somewhere warm for spring break? Somewhere sunny?" Sophia was quiet for a moment. Then I heard a muffled giggle. "Actually, Mom," she said, and I could almost see her biting her lip. "Tyler and I are already going to Disney World with Julian. We booked it last week." My stomach lurched. "Oh," I managed, my voice thinner than I intended. "Disney World. How nice." Tyler chimed in, the sound tinny through the phone speaker. "Yeah, Mom, it's gonna be awesome. We're gonna hit all the parks, stay at a really cool resort." He sounded breathless, already swept up in the excitement. "We thought about inviting you," Sophia added quickly, a little too quickly. "But, with Julian we figured you'd prefer a quieter holiday." A quieter holiday. A polite way of saying they didn't want me, my own children. I gripped the phone tighter, the smooth plastic digging into my palm. "Right," I said, forcing a lightness I didn't feel. "Of course. You kids have fun." My husband, Marcus, oblivious as usual, walked into the kitchen, loosened his tie, and poured himself a drink. He glanced at me, a fleeting, distracted look. "Who was that?" he asked, clinking ice in his glass. "Sophia," I replied, my voice flat. "She and Tyler are going to Disney World with Julian for spring break." Marcus nodded absently. Sounds fun, he mumbled, then added, almost as an afterthought, shame we can't all go. He didn't sound particularly bothered. Yes, a shame, I echoed, staring out at the rain. Later, after Marcus had retreated to his study, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the silence amplified by the rhythmic drumming of the rain. Disney World, the place where dreams come true. Except, apparently, mine. I'd always imagined family vacations, the four of us making memories, laughing together. But now it was clear. I wasn't part of the equation anymore. My role was to stay home, keep the house tidy, be the invisible support system while everyone else lived their lives. The thought settled in my chest like a lead weight. I picked up a stray travel brochure from the table, a glossy image of a tropical beach shimmering under a flawless blue sky. It was one I'd picked up weeks ago, dreaming of escaping the gray monotony of winter. I'd imagined us all there, strolling along the sand, sharing cocktails as the sun set. Now, the brochure felt heavy with disappointment. I tossed it aside. It wasn't just the vacation. It was the casual dismissal, the unspoken assumption that I wouldn't be included. It was the realization that I was fading into the background of my own family. The phone rang, shattering the quiet. It was my sister, Carol. Ethel, she began, her voice full of concern. Sophia just told me about their Disney trip. Are you okay? I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself. I'm fine, I lied, forcing a chuckle. Just a little surprised. That's all. Carol, thankfully, didn't push it. We chatted for a while about inconsequential things. The weather, her garden, anything to avoid the gaping hole of my disappointment. But as I hung up, the emptiness returned. I looked around the kitchen, at the familiar objects, the photographs on the wall, the worn cookbook on the counter. Everything felt dull, lifeless, as if the color had been drained away. I walked upstairs to my bedroom, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet. As I passed Sophia's closed door, I heard her laughing, her voice light and carefree. It stung. I went into my own room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. A woman I barely recognized stared back. Where had the sparkle gone? The laughter, the sense of purpose? It had been slowly eroded, chipped away by years of putting everyone else's needs before my own. But something shifted in me that night. A quiet resolve, a flicker of defiance. I wouldn't let them erase me. I wouldn't fade into the background. I would rediscover myself, reclaim my life. I didn't know how yet, but the seed had been planted, a tiny spark of rebellion ignited in the hollow of my disappointment. And in the quiet of that rainy Sunday night, I made a promise to myself, a promise to find my own sunshine, a promise that they would regret leaving me behind. The silence of the house pressed in on me, heavier now than it had ever been. Sophia's words, "We just didn't think you'd want to come," echoed in the emptiness. Didn't want to come to Disney World with my own children and grandchildren. I sank onto the plush sofa, the same one we'd picked out together years ago. A family decision. Now it felt like a cruel joke. My family, my children, had planned a spring break trip, a magical escape to the happiest place on earth, and hadn't even considered including me. It's just, more of a young people thing. Sophia had offered weekly, as if that explained everything. I picked up a throw pillow, clutching it to my chest. The fabric, once soft and comforting, now felt rough against my skin. Everything felt wrong, off kilter, like the world had shifted beneath my feet, leaving me stranded on unfamiliar ground. I had devoted my life to my family, to Marcus, to Sophia and Tyler, to their children. I'd cooked their meals, mended their clothes, celebrated their triumphs, and comforted them in their defeats. I had been the anchor, the steady presence, the unwavering support. And this was my reward, to be deemed too old, too irrelevant, to share in their joy. It's not that we don't love you, Mom, Sophia had quickly added, her voice strained, but the words felt hollow, like an afterthought. A hurried attempt to bandage a wound that cut far deeper than she realized. Love, was this love, to be excluded, dismissed, erased from the family narrative so casually I closed my eyes, trying to block out the hurt, the confusion, the rising tide of resentment. But it was no use. The dam had broken, and the floodgates of emotion were wide open. I wandered through the house, touching objects, tracing the outlines of photographs on the mantelpiece. Each one told a story, a memory, a moment of shared happiness, or so I had thought. Now, they felt like relics of a bygone era, a time when I actually mattered, a time when my presence was not just tolerated, but cherished. Had I been so blind, so caught up in the role of caretaker that I had failed to notice the gradual erosion of my own identity? I stopped in front of a mirror, staring at my reflection. Who was this woman, with the tired eyes and the faint lines etched around her mouth? Was this the woman I had become, a ghost in my own home, invisible to the people I loved most? A lump formed in my throat, threatening to choke me. I wanted to scream, to rage, to lash out at the unfairness of it all. But the sound died in my throat, replaced by a quiet resolve, a steely determination that surprised even me. This wasn't the end. This was a beginning, a chance to rewrite the narrative, to reclaim my story. I wouldn't let them diminish me, erase me. I would find myself again. I would rediscover the woman I had been before I became Mom, before my entire world revolved around the needs of others. I looked deeper into the mirror, searching for a spark, a flicker of the fire that had once burned so brightly within me, and slowly I began to see it, a glimmer of hope, a hint of defiance, a whisper of the woman I was meant to be. The silence of the house no longer felt oppressive. It felt expectant, like a blank canvas waiting to be filled. I walked into the kitchen, pulled out a notepad and pen, and started to write a list. Not a grocery list, not a to-do list, but a list of me. My desires, my dreams, the things I had put aside for so long. Travel, painting, learning to play the guitar. Things I had always wanted to do, but never had the time or the courage. They think I'm just background noise, I murmured to myself, a strange sense of calm washing over me. They think I'm content to fade away. They're wrong. A small smile played on my lips. This wasn't about revenge, not in the traditional sense. This was about rediscovery, about reclaiming my life, my time, my happiness. And in doing so, I would show them all, just how much they had underestimated me. I glanced at the calendar hanging on the wall. Spring break. They would be basking in the Florida sun, surrounded by cartoon characters and manufactured magic, and I would be embarking on my own adventure, an adventure of self-discovery, of reclaiming my identity, an adventure that would, in its own way, be far more magical than any theme park. I picked up the phone and started making calls. Flight reservations, hotel bookings, art classes, guitar lessons. My fingers trembled slightly as I dialed the numbers, a mixture of excitement and trepidation coursing through me. But the fear was overshadowed by a growing sense of anticipation, a thrill of embarking on the unknown. A single room, please, I told the hotel clerk, my voice clear and steady. Ocean view. I closed my eyes, imagining the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, the salty air on my skin, the freedom of being completely and utterly alone. This spring break, while my family was busy creating memories without me, I would be creating my own, and those memories, I suspected, would be far more precious, far more lasting, than any they could find in a crowded theme park. I hung up the phone, a sense of purpose settling over me. This was just the beginning, the first brushstroke on a canvas that was waiting to be filled with the colors of my own rediscovered life. And somewhere, deep down, a quiet voice whispered, "They'll be sorry they left me behind." Rain lashed against the windows, a dreary counterpoint to the cheery chatter emanating from the living room. I sat in the kitchen, nursing a cup of tea, watching them. Sophia and Julian, nestled on the sofa, their heads bent close together, whispering and giggling. Marcus, my husband, paced back and forth, phone pressed to his ear, occasionally throwing out a distracted "that's nice, dear," to whatever Sophia was saying. It struck me, with a force that made my breath catch in my throat, how little they noticed me, how seamlessly life went on without my active participation. "Sophia, darling," I called out, trying to inject myself into their cozy tableau. "Did you remember to confirm your flight for spring break?" Sophia's head snapped up, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. "Mom, we've been over this," she said, her tone sharper than I expected. "It's all booked. Julian and I are going to meet Tyler in Orlando. You know, the trip you opted out of." The last words hung in the air, a subtle barb reminding me of my exclusion. Julian gave a small, tight smile. "Yes, Mrs. Crawford, all taken care of course," I replied, forcing a lightness I didn't feel. "Just checking." I returned to my tea, the warm liquid doing little to soothe the chill that had settled in my bones. Over the next few days, I continued to observe them, this family of mine, like an anthropologist studying a newly discovered tribe. Their routines, their habits, their casual disregard for my presence, it all became glaringly obvious now that I was looking for it. Marcus, buried in his work, barely registering my existence beyond a perfunctory "dinner's ready." Tyler flitting in and out, camera perpetually glued to his hand, more interested in capturing the perfect shot than in engaging in conversation. And Sophia, consumed with wedding plans, and Julian, her world shrinking to accommodate only the two of them. I began to take long walks, letting the crisp air clear my head. The park near our house, usually a blur of green I passed on the way to the grocery store, suddenly revealed itself in vibrant detail. The delicate blush of the cherry blossoms, The playful chirping of the sparrows, the gentle murmur of the stream. I'd been too preoccupied to notice any of it before. One afternoon, while browsing in a small bookstore I'd never noticed before, a title caught my eye. Finding Your Own North Star, A Woman's Guide to Self-Discovery. I picked it up, thumbing through the pages, drawn in by the promise of reclaiming my own life. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table, a notebook and pen spread out before me. I started listing things, small things at first. Learn to bake sourdough bread, join a pottery class, finally finish writing that novel I'd started years ago. The list grew longer, each item a tiny spark of rebellion against the life I'd allowed myself to become trapped in. The next morning, I woke with a newfound sense of purpose. "Marcus," I said, as he rushed through his usual breakfast routine, "I've decided to take a trip." He barely looked up from his phone. "That's nice, dear," he mumbled. "Where are you going, Italy?" I replied, my voice steady. "I'm going to spend a month exploring Tuscany, maybe even longer." He finally looked up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Italy? But what about Sophia's wedding?" "Sophia's wedding is months away," I said, meeting his gaze. "Plenty of time to come back for that. Besides," I added, a small smile playing on my lips, "I think it's time I started living my own life." The surprise in his eyes deepened, morphing into something else. Confusion, uncertainty. I couldn't quite place it. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again, shaking his head slightly. "Well," he finally said, his voice tinged with a hint of bewilderment, "if that's what you want." I watched him leave for work, a strange mix of exhilaration and trepidation bubbling inside me. I knew this was just the beginning. There was so much I wanted to do, so much I wanted to see. I spent the next few days making arrangements, booking flights, researching villas, a sense of anticipation building with each passing hour. I told Sophia and Tyler about my plans, expecting resistance, but they seemed more surprised than anything else. "Italy," Sophia said, her brow furrowed. "That's great, Mom. But what about everything?" "Everything will be fine," I assured her. "I'll be back before the wedding. And maybe," I added, a mischievous glint in my eye, "I'll even bring back some souvenirs." I didn't tell them everything, not yet. There was one more piece of my plan that I was keeping to myself, a little surprise I was saving for just the right moment. A surprise that involved a certain piece of property, a certain holiday, and a certain realization they were all about to have about just how much they'd taken me for granted. The rain had stopped, and a sliver of sunlight peeked through the clouds, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I took a deep breath, the air filled with the promise of spring, the promise of change, the promise of a new beginning. This time, for me, rain lashed against the windows, mimicking the storm brewing inside me. I watched from the stairs landing as Marcus rummaged frantically through the laundry room, tossing aside neatly folded towels. "Ethel, have you seen my blue polo shirt? The one I wear for presentations?" he called up, his voice laced with a familiar impatience. I bit back a retort. It was folded neatly in his drawer, exactly where it always was. "Check your drawer, Marcus," I called back, my voice even. He emerged moments later, the shirt clutched in his hand. "Oh, right," he mumbled, Not meeting my gaze, he rushed off, muttering about being late for a meeting, leaving the laundry room in disarray. This had become the rhythm of our lives. Me, the silent conductor, orchestrating the chaos of their daily existence. Sophia and Julian, engrossed in wedding plans, treated my living room like their personal office, spreading brochures and fabric swatches across every surface. "Mom, do you mind if we leave these here? We'll pick them up later," Sophia had asked, not waiting for an answer. Later never seemed to arrive. Tyler, my aspiring photographer's son, constantly needed loans for new equipment, loans that mysteriously never found their way back to my account. He'd breeze in radiating charm, flash a winning smile, and tell me about his latest project. "Mom, this new lens is going to be a game changer. I can pay you back next month, promise." He never did. I'd always taken pride in being the anchor of our family, the one who kept everything running smoothly. But watching them now, I realized they took it all for granted. They saw me not as a person with my own needs and desires, but as a facilitator of theirs. The spring break trip to Disney, planned without my knowledge, let alone my input, had been a brutal wake-up call. "We just thought you'd be too busy with things," Sophia had stammered when I confronted her. "Too busy keeping their lives afloat," she meant. I poured myself a cup of tea, the warmth spreading through my chilled hands. The rain continued to batter the windows, a relentless percussion against the silence of the house. As I sipped my tea, I started to notice things I'd overlooked before: the overflowing bin of dry cleaning, waiting for me to sort and distribute; the stack of unpaid bills on the kitchen counter, left for me to organize; the overflowing shoe rack by the front door, a testament to their hurried comings and goings. Each item a small, silent accusation of their thoughtlessness. An idea began to take root, a tiny seed of defiance in the barren landscape of my resentment. It started with small things. I stopped picking up after them. The dry cleaning remained in the bin. The bills sat untouched on the counter. The shoes piled up, a growing monument to their indifference. Then I started reclaiming my time. I enrolled in a pottery class, something I'd always wanted to do, but never seemed to find the time for. I started taking long walks in the park, breathing in the fresh air and enjoying the solitude. I rediscovered my love of reading, losing myself in stories of faraway places and daring adventures. The changes were subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but slowly, the dynamic in the house began to shift. Marcus started asking, instead of demanding. "Ethel, do you know where my blue shirt is?" He'd ask tentatively, his voice devoid of its usual impatience. Sophia started picking up after herself, folding the wedding brochures and putting them away. Tyler even offered to help with the groceries, though his offer was accompanied by a request for a small loan. I simply smiled and shook my head. "I'm a little short myself, Tyler," I said, echoing his usual excuse. The look on his face was priceless. The more I focused on myself, the more invisible they seemed to become. Their demands, once so urgent, now faded into the background noise of my life. I found myself humming along to the radio, oblivious to the chaos swirling around me. I started sleeping better, waking up refreshed and energized. I rediscovered a joy I thought I'd lost, a sense of self that had been buried beneath layers of obligation. and resentment. One evening, I overheard Sophia talking on the phone with Julian. "It's like she's a different person," she whispered, her voice laced with bewilderment. "She's happy." I smiled to myself, the warmth of the tea spreading through me like a comforting embrace. My revenge wasn't about hurting them. It was about healing myself. It was about rediscovering who I was, independent of their needs and expectations. And it was working. I was becoming whole again, piece by carefully chosen piece. The rain had stopped. The sky was clearing, revealing a sliver of moon peeking through the clouds. I looked out the window, a quiet sense of anticipation building within me. The next step of my plan was taking shape, a bold, audacious move that would solidify my newfound independence and leave them wondering what hit them. I closed my eyes, a small smile playing on my lips. They had no idea what was coming. Rain lashed against the window pane, mimicking the storm brewing inside me. I sat in the quiet of my living room, the echoes of Sophia's words, "Mom, you wouldn't enjoy it," still ringing in my ears. They had booked their spring break trip to Disney World, a family trip that somehow didn't include me, the mother of that family. My husband, Marcus, had just shrugged when I'd confronted him. "The kids wanted a fast-paced trip, Ethel," he'd said, not meeting my eyes. "You'd just slow them down." I traced the rim of my teacup, the warmth failing to penetrate the chill that had settled deep within me. A slow burn started in my chest, not of anger, but something colder, something closer to realization. How had I gotten here? How had I become the woman they thought they could so easily leave behind? My reflection stared back at me from the darkened window, a ghost of the woman I used to be. I'd always prided myself on being the anchor of our family, the steady hand that kept everything running smoothly. School lunches, doctor's appointments, soccer practices, parent-teacher conferences. I was the invisible force that orchestrated the symphony of our family life. And Marcus, he was the conductor, taking all the credit while I remained hidden in the orchestra pit. Even Sophia, with her fiancé Julian always at her side these days, barely acknowledged my existence unless she needed something. "Mom, can you pick up my dry cleaning, Mom? Have you seen my keys?" My life had become a series of errands and forgotten thank yous. I picked up a framed photograph from the side table. It was from our last family vacation. 5 years ago, we were at the beach, everyone smiling, seemingly happy. I remembered how stressed I'd been that entire trip, making sure everyone had sunscreen, enough snacks, towels, and trying to keep the peace between Sophia and her younger brother, Tyler. I'd spent so much time catering to their needs that I hadn't even dipped my toes in the ocean. Looking at the photo now, I saw a stranger staring back at me. Where was the sparkle in her eyes, the carefree laughter? It was buried, I realized, beneath layers of obligation and self-neglect. I stood up and walked over to the fireplace, letting my fingers dance over the smooth, cool marble. I thought of the countless hours I'd spent decorating this house, creating a home for my family. I'd picked out the furniture, the paint colors, the curtains, all with their preferences in mind. Had any of them ever noticed? Had they ever appreciated the effort I put into making this house a sanctuary for them? The answer was a resounding no. They took it for granted, just as they took me for granted. The rain outside intensified, mirroring the surge of resolve within me. This wasn't just about the Disney trip. It was about something much bigger. It was about reclaiming my life, rediscovering the woman I was before I became mom. I went to my desk and pulled out a dusty notebook, the one I used to keep before life became consumed with carpools and grocery lists. I flipped through the pages, filled with half-written poems, sketches of gardens I dreamed of creating, and notes on books I longed to read. A faint smile touched my lips. It was time to dust off those dreams, to nurture the part of me that had withered in the shadows. I started making lists, books to read, courses to take, places to visit. Places I wanted to visit, not places chosen to entertain a demanding family. I thought of the art class I'd always wanted to take, the yoga retreat I'd dreamed of attending, the solo trip to Italy I'd put off for years. No more, I whispered to myself, my voice filled with a newfound strength. No more putting my life on hold for everyone else. I pulled out my laptop and started researching flight prices to Rome, cooking classes in Tuscany, photography workshops in Florence. The possibilities seemed endless, exhilarating. I felt a sense of purpose, a spark of joy I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about reclaiming my life, about showing myself, and maybe even them, what I was capable of. They think I'm just mom, I muttered, a steely glint in my eyes. They have no idea who I really am. I spent the next few days immersed in my plans, the excitement building with each booking confirmation. I started taking better care of myself, going for walks, eating healthier, and rediscovering the joy of simply being alone with my thoughts. I even started writing again, filling my notebook with poems and reflections. The house felt different, lighter somehow, as if my newfound energy was permeating every corner. I started to picture their faces when I told them about my plans, about my trip to Italy. Would they be surprised, guilty, maybe even a little envious? The thought brought a small, satisfied smile to my face. I wouldn't tell them just yet. I wanted to savor this feeling, this delicious secret, a little longer. The rain had stopped, and a sliver of sunlight peeked through the clouds, illuminating the room. It felt like a promise, a glimpse of the bright future I was creating for myself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive. The phone rang, shattering the quiet. It was Sophia. "Mom," she began, her voice hesitant, "about spring break." I took a deep breath and answered, my voice calm and steady. "Yes, Sophia." The crisp morning air invigorated me as I stepped onto the balcony of my new condo, a steaming mug warming my hands. It was hard to believe just a few months ago I was drowning in hurt, reeling from the casual cruelty of being excluded from the family spring break trip to Disney World. "Mom, you wouldn't enjoy it," Sophia had said, as if my enjoyment was a negligible factor in their family plans. Julian, ever the charmer, had chimed in with, "It's really more for the younger crowd, Ethel." The sting of their words had been sharp, but it had also been a catalyst. Now, looking out at the cityscape stretching before me, I felt a sense of peace and accomplishment I hadn't known I was missing. The condo, sleek and modern, was a testament to my newfound independence. It was a space entirely my own, a sanctuary where I could be Ethel, not just Mom or Mrs. Crawford. I had spent so many years wrapped up in the roles of wife and mother that I had forgotten who I was beneath those labels. The Disney trip, or rather, my exclusion from it, had forced me to confront that uncomfortable truth. I had allowed myself to become invisible, a background character in my own life. Another busy day planned. Miss Crawford, my personal trainer, David, stood in the doorway, a cheerful grin on his face. I smiled back, taking a sip of my tea. "Just enjoying the view before we start," I replied. He gestured towards the living area. "Whenever you're ready. We've got that new Pilates routine you wanted to try." I nodded, setting down my mug. "Let's do it." The physical transformation I'd undergone in the past few months was just as significant as the internal one. I felt stronger, healthier, more alive. After my workout, I headed to my art studio, a bright, airy space I'd rented a few blocks from the condo. Painting had always been a passion, something I'd squeezed into stolen moments between carpools and grocery runs. Now, it was a central part of my life. "The colors are really vibrant in this one," Ethel, my art instructor, Anya, commented, studying the canvas I was working on. It was an abstract piece, a swirl of blues and greens that represented the ocean of emotions I had navigated in recent months. "Thanks, Anya," I said, stepping back to admire my work. "It feels like I'm finally finding my voice." Later that afternoon, I met with my financial advisor, Sarah. We reviewed my investments, discussing strategies for growing my portfolio. "You're in a great position, Ethel," Sarah said, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. "Your husband's assets, well, let's just say they've been very beneficial." I gave a small, knowing smile. Marcus had always been focused on his career, on accumulating wealth. He hadn't realized, until now, that those assets were not just his. They were ours, and I was finally claiming my share. The evening found me at a gala for the local art museum, a glass of champagne in hand. I mingled with other patrons, discussing the latest exhibitions and the importance of supporting the arts. It was a world I hadn't had time for before, a world I was now embracing fully. "Ethel, is that you?" A familiar voice startled me. It was Marcus, looking dapper in his usual suit, but his eyes held a flicker of something I hadn't seen before: uncertainty. "Marcus," I said, my voice calm and even. "Fancy seeing you here." He stammered. I didn't know you were interested in art." I chuckled softly. "There's a lot you don't know about me, Marcus." He shifted uncomfortably. "Sophia and Julian are here too." He trailed off, as if unsure how to continue. I raised an eyebrow. "They what?" He cleared his throat. "They wanted to apologize for the Disney trip." I took a sip of my champagne, letting the bubbles tickle my tongue. "Apology accepted," I said, my gaze sweeping over the opulent ballroom. "But things have changed, Marcus." "I've changed." He looked around, a frown creasing his forehead. "Where's Tyler?" I asked, feigning concern. Marcus shrugged, distracted. He said something about a photography exhibition, probably with some friends. I smiled, a genuine smile this time. Tyler wouldn't be with some friends. He would be with me. We had spent the afternoon at his exhibition, admiring his stunning photographs of landscapes and cityscapes. He had confided in me about his dreams, his aspiration, things he had never shared with Marcus. We had connected in a way we never had before, a bond forged not by obligation, but by mutual respect and understanding. As Marcus continued to search the room for Sophia and Julian, I quietly slipped away, the image of Tyler's beaming face at his exhibition warming me more than any apology ever could. The house was in my name. The investments were yielding returns far beyond what Marcus had anticipated, and the children, they were finally seeing me, not just as their mother, but as a person, an individual with her own dreams and desires. The Disney trip, the one I hadn't been invited on, had been the best thing that ever happened to me. It had set me free. The crisp, unfamiliar air of Geneva filled my lungs as I stepped off the private jet. Luggage will be delivered directly to the chalet, Madam Crawford, the pilot said with a respectful nod. I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes, a feeling I hadn't truly experienced in what felt like a lifetime. It was a far cry from the hollow ache in my chest just months ago when Marcus, Sophia, and Tyler had blithely announced their spring break trip to Disney World. A trip that pointedly did not include me. "Mom, you wouldn't enjoy it," Sophia had said, her tone laced with a condescending sweetness that stung more than outright cruelty. "It's all fast rides and screaming kids. You'd be bored stiff." Now, the crisp mountain air held a promise, a sense of freedom that had been dormant for too long. This wasn't just a vacation, it was a reclamation. The chalet, nestled high in the Swiss Alps overlooking Lake Geneva, wasn't just a place to stay, it was a symbol of my newfound independence. After that humiliating Disney debacle, I'd quietly begun to untangle myself from the life I had woven for my family, a life that seemed to have no room for me. I sold the family home, the one I'd poured my heart and soul into decorating, the one that held decades of memories, both joyous and bittersweet. "Are you sure about this, Ethel?" Marcus had asked, his brow furrowed with a mixture of confusion and something akin to concern. Maybe it was guilt. "Absolutely," I'd replied, my voice firm, unwavering. The proceeds from the sale, coupled with shrewd investments I'd made over the years without their knowledge, had funded this new chapter, a chapter where I was the protagonist. My phone buzzed. It was Sophia. "Mom, where are you? Dad's been trying to reach you. We're worried." A pang of something, was it guilt, flickered within me, but it was quickly replaced by the exhilarating rush of finally taking control. "I'm in Switzerland," I said, my voice calm, almost nonchalant. "Enjoying the view." "Switzerland." Sophia's voice rose an octave. "What are you doing there? Why didn't you tell anyone?" "I needed some time to myself," I explained, gazing out at the breathtaking vista. "To rediscover." There was a silence on the other end, a silence pregnant with unspoken questions. "Mom," Sophia finally said, her voice softer now, tinged with a hint of uncertainty. "Julian and we've been thinking. Maybe we were wrong about the Disney trip. Maybe you would have enjoyed it." I almost laughed. "Perhaps," I replied, my voice even, "but I'm enjoying this considerably more." I ended the call before Sophia could respond, a small smile playing on my lips. The chalet was even more magnificent than the pictures. had suggested. A roaring fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow on the plush furnishings. A private chef bustled in the kitchen, preparing a gourmet meal. I wandered through the spacious rooms, each one decorated with exquisite taste, a far cry from the cluttered, lived-in feel of our old house. This was peace. This was serenity. This was mine. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Marcus. "Ethel," he began, his voice strained. "We need to talk. About the house. Where are you staying? We need you back. The house is sold, Marcus," I said, watching the snow fall gently on the peaks across the lake. "And as for me being back, you'll be back when I'm ready." He sputtered something about responsibilities, about family, but I tuned him out. Their frantic calls and messages continued to pour in over the next few days, each one a testament to their sudden realization that the woman they had taken for granted, the woman they had deemed invisible, was gone, not gone in the physical sense, but gone from the role they had assigned her. On my last day in Switzerland, I received a video call from Sophia and Julian. Sophia's eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. Julian stood beside her, looking uncomfortable. "Mom," Sophia pleaded, "we miss you. We were wrong. We didn't realize how much you do for us." Julian nodded in agreement. "We understand if you're angry," he said, "but please come home." Looking at their faces, etched with genuine remorse, a wave of something akin to satisfaction washed over me. Not quite forgiveness, not yet, but a quiet acknowledgement that the message had been received. "I'll be back soon," I told them, my voice softening just a fraction. "But things will be different." I ended the call and turned back to the breathtaking view, a new sense of purpose settling within me. The Swiss Alps, the serene lake, the luxurious chalet, they were all a symbol of my rebirth. I had rediscovered myself, my own desires, my own strength, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that when I returned, I would no longer be the invisible woman. I would be Ethel Crawford, a woman who knew her worth, a woman who demanded respect, a woman who had finally found her own happy ending. And as I boarded the jet back home, a thought flitted through my mind. Perhaps, just perhaps, I might even consider buying a small vacation home in Geneva, just for me.